Okay, well, I am Martin Howrelak. I'm the state representative here in Troy and also in Clawson. And I apologize for being a few minutes late. I drove straight in from Lansing. We just got over, and I was blessed by a relatively uneventful drive-in. And so I want to thank each and every one of you for coming this evening. This is certainly an area of much interest, debate, concern, and desire for resolution. I think it's pretty universal in our state. And I also want to thank, we have two gentlemen, Bill Hootery and Steve Van Dett from the city of Troy. And we also have from the state of Michigan, Tony Cradfield, and of course Dennis Kolar from our road commission for Oakland County. The agenda, if you haven't picked one up, we have agendas printed up. And the organization of the meeting is right now, I'm just giving an introduction, and then I will turn it over to the Michigan Department of Transportation, and then after that, the Road Commission for Oakland County, and we'll wrap it up with the City of Troy. Well, actually, I'm wrapping it up with some comments about legislative initiatives and attempted action on some road funding issues, and then we will transition into the question and answer period. In order to stay to a schedule and the agenda and to make sure that everybody has a fair shot at an equal amount of access to questions, the way we're going to do this is we have note cards, if you would be so kind as to fill in a note card, and if we can get those turned in at, say, by 7:45 or so, then we'll be able to keep everything on schedule, and the group up here, including me, will try to answer your questions as best we can. So without further ado, I will introduce from the Michigan Department of Transportation, Mr. Tony Cradfield.
Thank you, Representative. Again, I'm Tony Cradfield. I'm the Metro Region Engineer for the Michigan Department of Transportation, which means me and my team are responsible for the state trunk lines, your state trunk lines here in southeast Michigan, the counties of Oakland, Macomb, St. Clair, and Wayne County. And the state trunk line system is basically those roads that have numbers on them. So the interstate routes, U.S. routes, and M routes. So roads like Woodward, which is M1, U.S. 10, or U.S. 24, Telegraph Road, and I-75. This presentation is going to give just an overview of road funding and kind of the situation that we're in and what we believe is necessary to get us on a path that is going to move us forward as a state. Just as a reminder of the importance of the trunk line system in the state of Michigan is how transportation impacts the flow of trade and our economy. And in particular, 35% of all the trade between the United States and Canada, who is our largest trading partner, flows through the state of Michigan and across the borders in Detroit and Port Huron. And so it's very important to not only the trade of our state, but of our nation, that our transportation system is working effectively. 80% of Michigan tourism is auto-based, and that accounts for $18 billion a year in visitor spending. And so again, our roads and the impression that they leave on visitors makes a big impact on the tourism revenue. And then 99% of Michigan jobs are along commercial corridors, state trunk lines and other major roads that may be under county or city jurisdiction. So in Michigan, roads and bridges are funded with user fees, right? There's really three kind of key sources. There's federal gas tax that accounts for about $1 billion of revenue that comes back to the state of Michigan. About 25% of that is spent by local agencies. There's the state motor fuel tax, gasoline tax, which accounts for about $950 million, and state vehicle registration fees. It's about the same amount, $936 million. It used to be that the gas tax made up most of the revenue system, but as cars have become more efficient, and as people in recent years have been driving less because of the economy, the state registration fees have taken up a bigger portion of that revenue pie, and is something that we rely on quite a bit. Now, when you pay tax at the gas pump, all the tax that you pay at that time does not go into roads. You're paying that federal gas tax that I mentioned, that's about 18.4 cents. You're paying 18.7 cents in Michigan gas tax, and then there's 6% sales tax on top of all of that. And so in many articles and things you may have heard, it'll say that Michigan residents are paying as high a gas tax as many other states. And that is true if you include that sales tax. But the sales tax does not go to transportation. A big portion of it goes to schools and to local revenue sharing. And so there's just a very small amount that actually goes into transportation. And so really it's just that 18.7 cents that is going into transportation. The effect of that is, and a portion of that when it goes through the formula goes to fund transit, and then about 17 cents goes to roads. The effect when gas prices go up and people drive less is that you're still only getting 18 cents per gallon, but that percent goes up with the price, right? So we're actually getting less revenue into roads when the price of gas goes up and people buy less. So another way of looking at it is the per capita spending. How much do we spend per person in the state of Michigan versus other states? And we are dead last or 49th out of 50th?
Dead last.
Of all states in the union. And this is just a map of kind of the Midwest states and our neighbors, but we spend about $154 per person per year, as compared to, say, Ohio, which is $214 per person, and they're talking about raising their revenue, and they have toll roads. And the toll roads and the toll revenue that they spend, it goes to support those roads in particular. This graph is just a number of years ago, in the early 2000s, the legislature formed what's called the Asset Management Council. It's a board or a council that has a makeup of both state and local representatives, metropolitan planning organizations, and so forth, so that we could assess a measurement of the road condition across all different types of roads. And this graph simply shows what those condition ratings have been over time, and no surprise to anybody. In green, the number of roads that are in good condition has declined. In the center in yellow is the number of roads in fair condition has declined, and in red, the number of roads in poor condition has increased over that time. And this graph is just the state trunk line system, and the graph starts, I know it's hard to read numbers on here, but it starts back in 1996, which is the last time we did anything as a state to increase revenue for transportation in the state. And at that time, you'll see that bump after 2 years of when that revenue started kicking in. We made a commitment to get the trunk line system from its current condition, which was about 65% good and fair, to 90% in about 10 years. And we were able to do that in large part because we applied an asset management plan that looked at a strategy, a mix of fixes, and what was the right fix at the right time to try to increase the overall system condition. Now, we achieved that level, but then the economy started going down, revenue started going down, and you can see how the curve at the top there, which is the condition of the roads, is starting to go in the wrong direction. And so we simply aren't able, at the current revenue and amount of spending that we're able to do to keep the system in good condition is just not keeping up. I mentioned asset management and pavement strategies, and let me see if this light works here. So typically, pavements decline in condition on this kind of little S-curve. The first few years after you build a pavement, it's in pretty good condition. You don't see things change very much. But after about 10 to 12 years, it starts declining quite rapidly until it gets to be about 20 to 25 years, and then it's gotten so bad that it just really doesn't get noticeably worse. And the idea of asset management is that we don't want to just build a road and then leave it and not come back to it until it's in this condition. If we can go to a pavement while it's still in good or fair condition and do a lesser cost fix to extend the life, we're going to keep it in that good or fair condition for a longer amount of time. And we can do that at a much more cost-effective rate. Spending $1 right here will delay $6 to $14 down the road. And so many times you'll see us doing a fix, and you'll say, why are they spending money on that road? It's not nearly as bad as the one down the street. And it's because we're trying to keep that good road in good condition at a lower cost so that overall the total system is in better shape. Now, there's costs of doing nothing, right? Nobody likes to see taxes go up. I don't like to see my taxes go up either. But there are costs of not addressing this issue, and that comes from the damage to our vehicles. It comes from lost and wasted fuel because traffic is more congested or driving slower. And it can come from crashes. Quite frankly, when people are trying to avoid potholes and deal with a rough condition, there are sometimes increased crashes, and that has a societal as well as financial impact. All this was exacerbated, of course, by this particular winter that was the most severe that we've ever seen in Michigan. And just on the trunk line system, normally we spend about $85 million a year in winter costs. That's the average over the last 5 years. It was $121 million this year in order to just clear ice and snow. That's money that was not in the budget. Now, fortunately, the legislature did pass a supplemental appropriation this spring that provided an extra $100 million for all public agencies, road agencies, to deal with those extraordinary winter costs. When that money is allocated, it goes through a formula that's prescribed in Public Act 51. 39% of the money goes to MDOT, 39% is distributed among all the counties, and 22% roughly goes to the cities and villages. So that $100 million basically was $39 million to MDOT, and our costs exceeded our winter budget by $45 million. So it still didn't quite cover those costs in maintenance. And in addition, we had a lot of potholes, as you know, and so there were costs associated with that. In addition to that $100 million to deal with winter, the legislature also appropriated a one-time $115 million for priority road improvements. The law articulated they were going to pick a list of projects, and if they didn't come up with a list of projects by July 1st, that money would also go through the formula. And to date, we haven't seen a list of projects, so we're getting closer and closer to formula. So the governor, Governor Snyder, had a special message to the legislature in October of 2011, kind of alerting them to the fact that we need to be talking about how we take care of our transportation system. And there's been discussion going on in the legislature for the last year and a half. And there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of different ideas proposed. Over the last 2 years, the state funding has not been sufficient for MDOT to even match and capture all our federal aid, your federal gas tax dollars, back to Michigan, and so the legislature has appropriated general fund dollars and moved it into transportation so that we didn't lose our federal aid. They also, as I mentioned, had those one-time appropriations for dealing with winter and some of the priority conditions and priority projects. In addition, a few weeks ago, Speaker Bolger introduced a proposal, and the House has since passed it, and it's moved on to the Senate. And I believe there's a handout out there as well that gives you this detail, and my numbers may be just a little bit off. Trust the one that Ray prepared. But these are, in essence, the main elements of it. It was going to replace the cents per gallon gas tax with a percentage tax on the wholesale sale of gas. That's an important step because it allows for that fluctuating price to kind of make up for the revenue that's lost when people drive less, right? So regardless of price, right now, 18 cents per gallon is what the gas tax is. Whether it's $3 a gallon, $4 a gallon, or $5 a gallon, it's 18 cents per gallon. In this situation, that revenue would fluctuate with the price. And so when the gas price goes up and people drive a little bit less, we wouldn't be losing ground as much as we are today. That minor $47 million amount there is of additional revenue is simply making up for the difference. Right now, diesel tax is taxed at a rate of 15 cents a gallon. It moves it on par with other fuel tax at the rate of 18 cents a gallon. House Bill 5459 takes the unallocated sales tax, those parts of the sales tax that are not already constitutionally dedicated to schools and local revenue sharing, and dedicates that to transportation. So that accounts for about $130 million. There's some adjustments in registration fees, and correct me, Representative, if I'm wrong about this. I think it is basically Right now, your registration fee may get adjusted the first few years if you have a new car, and this would remove those adjustments and basically keep it the same based on the original value of the car. House Bill 5492 dedicates 1% of the use tax, so that's basically sales tax on internet sales to roads, and then some minor changes to overweight truck fees that account for about $5 million. So in total, Speaker Bolger's proposal puts $460 million into transportation that isn't there today. Overall is largely revenue neutral. There's a few minor increases in there, but largely to the state as a whole is revenue neutral. For MDOT, now after you take that $460 million, you put it through that Act 51 formula, that 39% of that is basically what those one-time transfers of general fund have been the last few years to match federal aid. So for MDOT, it won't mean any new projects. It will mean we will have some certainty that we can match federal aid year after year. So how much new revenue is needed to keep that condition level up? There's been considerable discussion and testimony about this. The governor has proposed $1.2 billion focused on commercial corridors, so not all roads. And there are additional needs, as we know, beyond commercial corridors, your local streets and county and city streets. And then infrastructure investment beyond just fixing the roads, if we want new interchanges or major improvements, that's above the $1.2 billion. And just to give you an idea of kind of what it will take. So this bottom line is basically if we do nothing. We're kind of in this condition here where we're at 90% and declining. It goes down very quickly in a matter of a few years. With if we were to match all federal aid, which is basically what the current House proposal is, we're still on that decline. It's not as severe, but within 10 years or so, we're still in pretty bad shape as a state. If we get the 1.2 or 1.3 billion, it's better yet. We stabilize around 60% good and fair, but it's still not quite enough. Really, it's about 1.6, 1.7 billion that is really needed to keep the state trunk line system at a good level of service. Michigan's not the only state that's wrestling with this. There's 8 other states that have proposals that they're moving forward. In fact, Pennsylvania has already passed their revenue package of an additional $2.3 billion in their state. Now, while there's costs of doing nothing, there's also benefits if we do implement this and get additional revenue into transportation, however that is done. There's a lot of jobs that are generated by the transportation sector. And at these revenue levels would account for 14,000 jobs in the industry. Most of those are in the private sector. We generally, all the public agencies hire private companies to do our heavy construction work. And that has an impact on personal income and the gross state product. And so that can have a significant return on the investment, a rate about 3.5 to 1 over time. I won't go through all that other than to say I think we're all hearing that there's a lot of discussion about we need to do something about this. It's in the media and it's in the news every day. Now I just want to touch on a couple other things about MDOT just to let you know that we take our job as stewards of your tax dollars very seriously, and we're always looking for ways to be more efficient, more innovative, and find ways to stretch the dollars as best we can. I want to highlight just a couple examples of this. First of all is something we're calling e-construction, where we're trying to leverage technology to do the work that we do in a much smarter and faster and lower cost way. In particular, right now, we are implementing, and by October, all our projects that will be led after October are going to be managed entirely electronically. No paper documentation. And the big savings in this, I mean, you're not printing all these documents, you're not putting them in the mail. It's electronic signatures. We're turning approvals around faster, which means contractors get paid faster, their workers get paid faster, and so money gets flowing into the economy, and we're not paying the cost of interest in terms of cash flow and so forth. It's also allowing us to do 3D modeling and GPS controlled equipment on the grading machines and so forth. That allows them to be more efficient, the contractors to be more efficient in the field, and get projects done faster and cheaper. We're looking at a number of ways to accelerate open to traffic with rapid set concrete and different ways to accelerate projects so that you're not inconvenienced and we're not impacting the economy of the state. And we're looking at innovative technology, things like warm mix asphalt. Asphalt, blacktop, is heated up to a very high degree in order to produce it. It's a tar and it has to be heated up to a high degree in order to mix it. Warm mix asphalt allows that to happen at a lower temperature, which means they're burning less fuel to get it to a higher temperature. And it actually is improving the performance of the asphalt when it is actually placed. So this is an initiative that is actually being pushed by the Federal Highway Administration nationwide, but Michigan has adopted it as a acceptable practice and basically is at the contractor's discretion if it's cheaper for them to do that. Many of you may be familiar, this is down in Wayne County, the I-96 project in Livonia, but I just wanted to highlight there's a number of those initiatives that I mentioned as well as others that are all involved in accelerating this project and applying these innovations to be faster. And the big one that I would point out is that grade control. These pavers, we used to have these string lines that guide the paver so that they get the pavement right at the right elevation. They don't have to do that now. It's all digital and based on the global positioning satellites. And so now they can hop around from place to place in the job and get pieces done wherever they're ready to pave. And instead of having to wait for surveyors to come and stake it out and put these string lines in, and then somebody runs over them and you got to reset them, and it is incredibly more efficient, and it's going to be why we can build this 7 miles of 8-lane freeway in about 180 days. So I just want to touch quickly on some of the local investments here, and I'll get to a couple frequently asked questions, and I'll turn it over to Dennis. First of all, there's not a lot of work in the Troy area in the immediate future, but there is some repair work just north of here on the bridge that carries South Boulevard over I-75. It's mostly abutment repair. This is basically that preventive maintenance thing. We don't want the bridge to get to a point where it's much more costly to have to replace it. So if we can repair these small elements, we're going to extend the life of it and keep that bridge in good condition. As you probably have experienced, from 12 Mile to Square Lake, we're doing a number of maintenance repairs. That's to hold us for some time until we can get to the major project to rebuild I-75. And then I-75 under University Drive, you probably saw in the news this January. We discovered some cracks in the beams there. We put temporary supports up. We fortunately on that I-96 job had some bid savings that will allow us to replace the bridge. The City of Auburn Hills wants to expand the interchange, and they're going to contribute some of their money, and we're waiting to see if there's some additional revenue out of the Priority Roads program that can be applied to finish out that project. And then the big project that we're working toward is rebuilding I-75. Now the funny thing is, while revenue is tight and we have limited resources, it really makes the priorities that we have rise to the top. And there are really 2 corridors in Metro Detroit that are in really poor condition and absolutely have to be addressed. And that's I-75 through Oakland County from 8 Mile to just south of M59, and I-94 through Detroit from I-96 to Conner. And I don't need to tell you how rough the pavement is out there and what needs to be done. The project that has been proposed for many years is to reconstruct from the ground up and add a 4th lane that would be a high occupancy vehicle lane in the median side here. And the really big improvement is creating this braided ramp at the 696 I-75 interchange where the traffic is all merging there and we have congestion on a daily basis. We have made the decision, even if there is no new revenue, to spend what revenue we have over the next 20 years to build out this project and the I-94 project, basically alternating year by year between the 2 corridors. And so our first stretch of that will be from Square Lake to around Adams in 2016 and 2017. So that we're going to get started on that, and then every other year we'll be kind of working our way toward it. But at the current amount of revenue that we have to spend in Metro Detroit, which is about $200 million a year, it's going to take us probably about 18 years to get the whole corridor done. So just a few frequently asked questions I'll just get to really quickly. Are there better ways to patch potholes that last longer? Well, there's a lot of different ways to patch potholes. First of all, MDOT contracts with our partners at Oakland County, and they do a great job. They're good partners to work with. But when you patch potholes, there's a whole lot of other things you got to take into consideration. When it's the middle of winter and every other day it's snowing, you don't have a lot of time to address those things. And so sometimes the best thing to do is get as many done as you can, and the fastest way to do that is with cold patch. We know that doesn't last as long as other methods, but in the middle of winter, that may be the best way that we can do it. When we get into the summer months, then we look at doing types of patches that may last longer. And so the things that we're doing out on I-75 right now is more of a hot asphalt mix that is going to last longer. There's other types of pothole patching processes and materials that can be used that the county does use. Again, when they have more time and can do it in a more methodical way. Why don't we do a lot of maintenance repairs in the winter? Well, the reality is it's winter. We have frost heave, and there's moisture underneath the potholes or in the joints that are broken up. And so it's really not a very effective time to do that, because anything you put in there is going to move and is going to come out again. So much of the stuff we do in the winter has to be short-term and temporary until we get to a more temperate climate in the spring and the summer. Who decides whether we use concrete or asphalt? Well, for the Department of Transportation, it's governed by state law. When we reconstruct or rehabilitate a road, state law requires that we look at the total life cycle cost of what the fix is. And it takes into account the amount of trucks that are going to drive over it over a 20-year period, and what the design of that pavement is, and then what maintenance is going to have to happen over the cycle of 20 to 30 years. And that will usually determine whether we use concrete or asphalt. Generally speaking, on major interstates where you have a lot of trucks, it's going to end up being concrete. On roads that are more like arterials, it could go either way. It just depends on what the truck traffic is and what the soil conditions are. A lot of people say, why don't you require contractors to warranty their work? Well, actually we do. Michigan is a leader in the country in using warranties. We warrant the contractor's materials and workmanship. There's things that we can't practically warrant because it just wouldn't be cost effective. The risk transfer to the contractors would be too high. But we've, since 1997, have had over 3,200 warranties on our projects across the state. About 12% of those we've had to call in for repairs, but by and large it's been a pretty effective program. Are there more areas that we could warrant? Perhaps, but you pay for that. A contractor has to get a bond to secure his warranty, and he passes that cost on to all of us. It comes into the cost of the project. So we have to weigh the benefits of those warranties versus what they cost. And then if we didn't allow such heavy trucks, our roads wouldn't fall apart so fast. There's a brochure out there about truck weights in Michigan. There's a lot of misinformation about truck weights. Yes, Michigan does allow higher truck weights than most other states, but we also require more axles, and so the weight per axle is comparable to what other states have. It's also true that not every truck is overweight. Only about 6% of the trucks in Michigan are permitted to be over the 80,000 pounds, which is typical of other states. So it's really a small fraction of what we're talking about. And again, that's not the main cause of the deterioration of our roads. It's the fact that we're not keeping up with the investment that we need to be making in them, as well as weather conditions and so forth. I'm sure this will be posted somewhere on the city's website, but there's a number of links here if you want more information. As always, you can contact MDOT at michigan.gov/MDOT and give us comments and feedback. And in particular, in Metro Detroit, we want to know how the work zones that we do have are working for you. We invite you to become what we call a road watcher and let us know weekly what your experience is driving through work zones. And that information goes directly to my staff so that they can act on it each week and address any issues that come up. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity, and we'll answer questions when it's all done. Dennis?
That one?
We probably have to
She's gonna
queue
load
up.
it?
Here she comes.
I'll start off by reintroducing myself. My name's Dennis Kolar. I'm Managing Director of the Road Commission for Oakland County. And it's certainly a pleasure to be here and to share some information. I'll go through, give you some basic information about the Road Commission. I'll probably touch on a couple of things that Tony has already touched on, so I'll gloss over those a little bit and share with you a few things we're doing at the Road Commission as far as when it comes to efficiencies. At the Road Commission for Oakland County, we are separate from the county government. A lot of people confuse us that we're part of the government, county government proper, but we are not. We have currently 376 employees. I'll touch on where we were before, but that's less than in the 50s, the late 50s. In the late 50s, the population of Oakland County was 600,000. We're now at 1.2 million. I mean, the miles of roads has substantially increased in that amount of time. We have a $108 million budget for 2014, and about $60 million of that comes from registration fees or the gas tax, or what we call the MTF. The rest of it comes from federal aid, being in cost participation with cities and villages and townships. We're always looking for a way to leverage our money so we can get more done with the dollars we have. We also, in Oakland County, have the largest county road system, 2,700 miles of roads. A lot of people don't realize this. 770 miles of the roads in Oakland County are still gravel. And we have some of the highest traffic counts on gravel roads. That in itself presents a real challenge in the winter and the spring. And we also, as Tony mentioned, we maintain the 230 miles of state trunk lines. 90% of all the traffic signals. I'll show you a little bit later how we share resources in this county, and that's always a topic. How come cities and agencies don't get together and share for cost savings? Well, here in Oakland County, we do that. And at the Road Commission, we take care of all but 3 communities. And we have over 150,000 road signs. 3 levels of road jurisdiction. Tony mentioned what MDOT, if they're, I say I's, M's, or US, they're MDOTs. The Road Commission, we have 2,700 miles of roads. Typically in communities like, or in the cities, you get every other mile road. In townships, we have all the roads. Then there's another 2,700 miles of city and village streets. So total in Oakland County, there's 5,600 miles of roads. That's a lot of road to maintain and keep in good shape. Now, why are the potholes so bad this year? Yep, the winter was tough. Tony mentioned MDOT was over budget, and it was great that the legislators were able to add the funding they did to help us try to recover from the winter. But in our case, too, it just wasn't quite enough, but we're really thankful for what we did get. But, I mean, this is really a result. Where the roads are today is a number of years of lack of investment in the roads. You know, Tony mentioned warranties. And typically, I believe they're about 5 years or so a warranty. We looked at our system and said, okay, what if we had warranted our system at 5 years? Well, 98% of the Road Commission system would be out of warranty. I mean, the result is we just haven't been able to keep up with the investment to keep the roads in better shape. This is another way to look at the per capita investment that Tony had on his chart. And this comes from the U.S. Census Bureau, and it shows now that Michigan ranks dead last on what it invests in roads. And if you look back to the early 60s, we've bounced around in the bottom 10 for investing in roads. And, you know, ultimately you get what you pay for. Tony had this similar chart and showing that condition of the system, and it was a legislator that asked when road guys like myself were saying we need additional funding. They said, well, that's fine, but let's see what condition is the system in, and that's a fair question. So this was developed to point that out. And as you can see, the system, because of that lack of investment, is continuing to deteriorate. A little bit different way to look at the MTF, or the Michigan Transportation Fund, showing the difference between the gas tax and vehicle registration fees. We took out the diesel tax, but it's showing the same thing. The gas tax at one point was a far bigger source of revenue than the registration fees, and it's just a better fuel economy. Obviously, we went through an economic downturn. All that is reduce the amount of revenue that's generated by the gas tax. And there's no property taxes in the Michigan Transportation Fund. This is going to be a little hard to see, I think, but it shows where Michigan ranks the states. We are tied with 30th for our gas tax, and we are 42nd in diesel fuel per gallon tax. So, and actually this is probably wrong now, since Pennsylvania has increased and there's a couple other states that have increased their gas tax, but it's just showing you where we rank. Again, it's the investment we put in the system that is going to have a direct reflection on the condition of the system. Over on the left, I hear it all the time, Ohio. Ohio has better roads and their gas is cheaper. How can they do that? Well, first they can have better roads because they're at 28 cents a gallon. And as Tony mentioned, they're talking about upping that or having other sources of revenue. And as Tony mentioned, we're one of 4 or 6 states that apply the sales tax to the price of fuel. So if you went down to Ohio and put 6% sales tax on their fuel, it would be more than ours, considerably more. Share with you at the Road Commission from fiscal year 2003 through 13, our revenue sources declined by 2.6%. That might not seem like a lot, but here's just an example of what we've experienced in increases in materials that we need to do our operation. Now, diesel fuel obviously is up quite a bit, and we spent a lot of money this past winter on diesel fuel. Gasoline's up, asphalt, cold patch. Some people ask me, what about price of salt? And actually, that'll be higher now, but it's trucking. Trucking's the largest cost for salt, which gets back to petroleum. And here's just what it's done to the Road Commission as far as the declining revenues. As of April, we had 180 unfilled positions, which gets us back to the 356 current employees. That's 35% fewer than in 2007. And over 60 of those vacancies were snowplow drivers. Now, this past winter and the winter before, we've gone to some temporaries. We hire part-time help for winter, which has helped, but we're still not at the strength we need to be for winter storms. What we do is truck drivers work 16 hours and they're off 5.5 hours. Well, you get into some of the winter storms we had this year, you work 16, you're off 5.5, you work 16, you're off 5.5. Pretty soon you don't want to come in, and that's understandable. If anybody ever had a chance to ride in a truck in inclement weather for that long a time, that's a tough job. Right now, we have a deficit in our equipment of over $25 million. That means that we've made some choices at the Road Commission to try to do as much as we can. I mentioned leveraging our money for road projects and trying to maintain a staff the best we can, and it's really come on the back of the equipment. Now, this year we purchased 18 dump trucks, but we still have quite a backlog in equipment needs. And quite frankly, all the services we do have been reduced. We're now in the emergency mode. A lot of things we did, and you'll see that we don't litter pick, we don't cut grass like we used to. Those aesthetic items are things that we've chosen that we're going to do less of so we can maintain the pavement surface and focus on the safety of the system. Now, this might be a little hard to read. At the top is the current condition based on asset management. Now, that's 2012. We don't have the 13 information yet, but it shows about 13% of the system is in poor condition. And as Tony mentioned, the governor's proposal at 1.2, or actually, if you go with the inflation, it's should be 1.6 or 1.7 billion. If we had that additional funding on your left, you'd see that the poor roads would reduce to 6%, but the good roads go from 33 to 68. And if there's nothing done, then the poor roads, and that's on the lower right, we'd have 35% of our system in poor shape, only 15% in good, and 50% in fair, which is just waiting to go into the red. How we've cut costs over the years. I've been at the Road Commission, approaching, it's 29 years the other day. We've always looked at whether it's better to have a private contractor do the work, or is it best to be done by us? We look at our activities constantly. Recently, the big thing was public agencies and their benefits. We've totally restructured our retirement. We went from a retirement system that's 12% of payroll and reduced it down to 4% of payroll. Retiree health care has been eliminated. Technology, we look for it at every corner, and that's no pun intended. Obviously, our traffic system that's started here in Troy, we use, but even it comes down to computer-aided design, the fleet management, tracking things we have in our trucks, to the automated salt spreaders. Anytime we can use technology, we'll do that. Obviously, staff reductions, we're cross-training staff. We have staff that works in the office that drive trucks to help fill in driving trucks. We cross-train staff to work in different departments. Reorganize departments, we've eliminated departments. And we share our resources with other local agencies. I'm not going to go through all of these, but that's just a general list of everything activities that we've privatized or partially privatized. Lots of times we're looking at it saying we need to have staff for those emergencies for that activity, but if we're going to have a program, we can hire a contractor. More on resource sharing, the maintenance work. As Tony said, we provide maintenance work. We're MDOT. We also have the City of Troy, who we pay to maintain some of our roads. And they do a very good job. We try to coordinate with others when we buy materials. We sell materials to other communities. We have on-staff trainers that we've shared with other cities and townships to help train them specifically in the truck driving area. Fuel, we have a number of communities, Sheriff's Department, that buy fuel from us. And I mentioned maintaining the system for MDOT. Here, I'll probably rush through because I think you have, what, Troy Rocks, the projects? Because if you had this one, this is Livernois over the Lane Ditch. That's called a bridge replacement. It's culvert, and that'll start in August. And you're going to talk about the concrete slab replacement. So I'll just go right through these and let Steve and Bill, but I will say the Road Commission really appreciates the city of Troy and the investment that they're making on Road Commission roads. They're taking the lead on it, and quite frankly, without Troy's help, it wouldn't happen. Some future projects in Troy: John R. Long Lake to South Boulevard, reconstruct and widen the 5 lanes in 15 and 16. DeQuinder, this one's a long time coming, widen the 5 lanes from Long Lake to Auburn in 16 and 17. Livernois, Long Lake to Square Lake, reconstruction and widen the 5 lanes in 17 and 18. With that, we'll turn it over to, is it Bill or Steve?
I just want to interject real quickly. If anybody has any questions, Ray is walking the aisles. He has cards, and you can turn them in to him as well.
I'm Bill Hootery. I'm the Deputy City Engineer for the City of Troy, and I'm going to spend just a little bit of time talking about what we call Troy Roads Rock. It is our program to fix county roads, because as you heard Tony and Dennis both talk about lack of funds. Our task was to figure out just how to do it. We didn't have money, they didn't have money, but somebody's got money, so we went looking for it, and we came back with a pretty good pot of money to make some significant improvements on county roads. First, I just wanted to start off with road jurisdiction. A lot of the people in the room in the city that live, work, drive through Troy, they don't realize whose road is who, and a lot of times they don't really care. But if you look at the map, the green roads are under the jurisdiction of the Road Commission for Oakland County. The blue roads are city roads, and then of course I-75 in the middle is the orange color. So the majority of major roads in Troy are under the jurisdiction of the Road Commission for Oakland County, and that's what our program concentrated on. Why county roads? When we first started looking at conditions, I mean, two big things popped up. First, the county roads, the condition, they were the worst condition roads in the city. We took more calls on Long Lake Road, and I'm sure the county took several calls on Long Lake Road this past winter into the spring. The other big thing is we looked at what roads would give us the biggest bang for the buck or impact the most people. County roads carry the most people in Troy. So we felt that that was a way to reach more of the constituents. And if you look at just the 5 roads that we are including in our Troy Roads Rock plan, that's about 150,000 vehicles a day. So there's no other project that we could do that would make that type of impact on a daily basis other than doing work on county roads. Some of the questions we asked: why now? A big one, most people when they would get myself or Steve to voice their concerns about the condition of Long Lake or Big Beaver or John R. or DeQuinder. They didn't want to hear that it was a county road. They didn't care. It was in Troy, it was in their community, it was in the place where they worked, it was in the place that they visited. They just wanted it fixed. It was costing, and it is costing people time and money. We had 3 or 4 people just in our department that blew out tires, they bent tie rod, all kinds of different things. I mean, people were spending a lot of time going to repair shops. They're spending money getting tires fixed, getting rims replaced, getting repairs on their cars. It's costing the city money. The police department had to go out to respond to potholes. We had potholes at Square Lake and Crooks where they literally had to park in the road because the potholes were so large that it was unsafe to let vehicles pass through. We had our Public Works was going out on weekends. The county was all over Oakland County trying to fill potholes, so they couldn't necessarily get to areas in Troy that we needed to have addressed immediately, so our Public Works was coming out to do a lot of that maintenance. And this isn't a new problem. County roads have been deteriorating for years. Wade was on council back in 2011 when we talked about this, and times were much different then. But it's something that this past winter, it really seemed to accelerate things, especially on Long Lake and DeQuinder and John R. There are some areas there that almost became unpassable. So it was something that we had to look at. We had to figure out a way to do it. So really, what we're talking about is good roads. I mean, plain and simple, we wanted to provide good roads for the citizens of Troy, the people that live, work, and play here, that pass through here. And so we started looking around, and we talked to the Road Commission, Dennis Kolar and his staff. We talked to Representative Howrylak's office and Papa George's office, and started looking at where can we find some money, where can we put together a pot of money to make repairs on county roads. And what we came up with is, and I'll touch on it in the next slide, is about a $10.5 million project to fix county roads. And really Troy shares about $5.1 million, $5 million from the general fund, $100,000 from major road capital as part of a tri-party match. So we're getting a little better than a one-to-one match. Every dollar we put in, we're getting a little better than a dollar back. And this would have never been possible without the county stepping up to the plate, without the funds that Representative Howrylak brought to us, and some other things that we kind of lucked into. And it's turned into quite a program. So this is a little busy slide, but it's kind of intentional because it took a whole bunch of money, a whole bunch of different sources of funds to make this program go. First and foremost, the $5 million from the city's general fund, and we did reap a significant benefit from Delisio Contracting, who is doing the work for us under contract with the city. Their bid came in about 23% under our $5 million estimate. That was what we put out on the streets, was about $5 million worth of concrete slab work. They gave us a hometown discount. They've done work for the city for several years. They've done very good work. The next low bidder was about $5.1 million. So what that means is we could take that 3.8, go up to that 5 million, and do about 23% more concrete. And as we're seeing, when you go out and mark out concrete, when you physically go out and walk it and mark it out, you find a lot more than what you see when just from a windshield survey or something like that when you're kind of preparing a contract. The Road Commission, we met with them early. We met with them often. We said, all right, we've got $5 million. What do you have? They didn't have funds, but what they did have is expertise, specifically in the inspection. They offered to provide all of the construction inspection. They offered to provide all of the testing of materials. They offered to replace all of the loops, which you'll see out on Big Beaver, where you've got loops in the pavement at the signal locations. They're going to provide all of the pavement marking when the work is done. They are providing the match to the federal funds as well, about $500,000. That's about $500,000 for the match. So in total, a little over $2.3 million is coming from the county. Almost $1.9 million from federal funds. This is from the National Highway Performance Program. It's a kind of a new category that the city is one of 8 communities, along with the Road Commission, that qualify for that. We originally only had $291,000. We had a meeting while this program was developing, and this thing has evolved as we went along on March the 20th, and we walked out of that meeting with an additional $1.6 million, in part because we had this program evolving. We had money, we worked with the county, they would provide the match to it, and we were able to roll that into the Big Beaver project that's going to be used on West Big Beaver, the area from Adams to City Hall. So that's going to provide about a $2.7 million project there to do work. Representative Howrylak's office, along with Senator Papa George, brought back $1 million to Troy through the State Roads and Risk Reserve Fund. That's 100% money. There's no match to that money, so that's about as ideal a fund as you could get. And that money was earmarked for work on Crooks Road from Waddles up through Square Lake, kind of north and south of the work we did last year at Crooks and 75. Then the County of Oakland has a small amount, $100,000, to as their portion of the tri-party program, and then $106,000 from our LDFA, which is the area on Big Beaver between Bellingham and John R. And then in addition, that is not included in this $10.5 million is another $750,000 that Representative Howrlack graciously brought back to Troy to replace the structure over at Livernois just south of Town Center. That culvert there has been in very poor condition for years, and it's a way for that work to get done, and there is no match to that money as well, so we're very thankful for that. And then this is a map. The green areas are the roads that are included in the TR2 program. The blue, because one of the things we were also tasked with is, all right, you're going to fix county roads. We don't want you to lay off the city roads either, because as you saw, for every dollar you spend in maintenance, you're saving yourself $6 to $14 down the road. We didn't want to kick the can down the road with our locals, so we're spending almost a like amount, about $10.5 million on local roads in the current year and the coming year on majors, industrials, and locals, with the lion's share of that money, about $6.5 million, budgeted for road repairs on local roads. So you're going to see a significant amount of work coming up this fall, next spring, on the local road system. In addition, because most of the county road work should be done before the snow flies. So after that, Delisio is going to be moving to the locals and in the industrial roads. So it's a pretty significant program on both ends of the stick. And I'm going to turn it over to Steve, who's going to give you a little more information about Troy Roads Rock.
Okay, good evening. My name is Steve Van Dett. I'm the city engineer here in Troy, and I'm happy to be here to talk about our #1 project for this year. It's the 2014 Troy RCOC Concrete Pavement Repair Program, also known as Troy Roads Rock. And you may have seen these signs along Lake where we're currently doing work, troyroadsrock.com. If you go to that site, it'll direct you to that site, and we have information about what roads are being worked on, lane closures, what they're doing on the roads, pouring, saw cutting, and so on and so forth. The TR2 program, as it's otherwise known as well, is a $10.5 million program, as Bill pointed out, and the sources, we had 6 funding sources, from the Road Commission to MDOT to NHPP monies that went into the total $10.5 million project. It's a truly collaborative effort between the city, county, and state to put together these funds to address the most urgent needs in Troy, which are the county roads, which happen to be among the roads with the highest traffic and in the poorest condition, as we've seen. This is a map of the Troy Roads Rock program. What you see in pink are the roads that are being done by the city's contractor, Delisio Contracting. We put the contract out for bids in March of this year, and that was before all the I's were dotted and T's were crossed on the funding for this program. And we did that because we wanted to be in a position to hit the ground running in April as soon as the frost laws were lifted. We wanted to hit the ground running and start construction right away. And we were able to do that. We started in April 16th, and we started on Long Lake Road, and right now we're about little over 50% complete. The roads we're doing, those in pink, John R., Long Lake, DeQuinder, and Big Beaver. And those roads that are shown in green are roads that are being, the contracting for the road repairs is being done by the Road Commission for Oakland County. They are currently working to finalize the plans and specifications, and those will be going out for bid. Those roads will be going out for bid in July, and construction is hopefully will be underway in August. Just to give you an idea of the timeline here, as I mentioned, we started on Long Lake. We hope to be done near the end of June, and from there they'll be heading over to John R. We've done saw cutting on John R, and they were out there today doing saw cutting, and soon they will be there doing some pavement removal and starting pouring. And there could be a time there where we have both Long Lake and John R. both under construction at the same time, but not in front of the Troy Athens High School until school is out, which I believe is next week. Then from John R., we plan to go back to Long Lake on the westerly side of Long Lake and do portions of Long Lake east and west of Crooks. Then we'll be finishing up with Big Beaver and DeQuinder. As far as the actual month of this year that will be there, we don't know. We will announce the schedule as we go, and that'll be put up on the website, troyroadsrock.com. As I mentioned, we started work April 16th. We had signs out on Long Lake that it was going to be starting. And if you go to the website, you'll also see this flyer that we put out, which talks about the roads that are being done and the funding aspects of this program and a rough timeline. So this is what we're faced with on Long Lake and many of the other roads. Up on the top right of this slide, you can see Livernois, just north of Long Lake. And those are potholes that have grown and grown and grown over the years. They've been filled with cold patch, and each year they get bigger and bigger until pretty much the entire road surface has deteriorated away. The bottom slide there shows Long Lake with a condition known as ASR, and that condition is on Long Lake is the major cause of the deterioration of that road. ASR is alkali silica reactivity. It's a chemical reaction that causes the concrete to crack. When it cracks, it lets in water. When water gets in the freeze-thaw cycles, it starts to create a pothole. And when that pothole is cold patched, and only cold patched, over the years it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And what we've seen from this year, from the winter that we had, the harsh winter that we had, I think, in my opinion, it has accelerated the condition, or the deterioration, I should say, of the roads by a couple of years. Here's a close-up of ASR. You can see upper left slide. It's a little difficult to see, but it's a map pattern, and this particular slab has not yet opened up. There's no potholes in it. It's been down for about 17 years, and sometimes you just never know with slabs that have ASR whether it's going to deteriorate or not. Long Lake, unfortunately, has ASR from end to end, and most of it has broken up quite badly. In the center, you see the map pattern up close. That's what it looks like. And the lower right, you can see areas that have been cold patched that had areas that had cold patch that have that have broken up and have received cold patch. This is an interesting slide here. This is, I call the anatomy of a pothole. When we saw cut Long Lake Road, saw cut one of the lanes and did the removal, we actually sawed right through a pothole. And so what you see here is the cold patch on top, sort of. Some of it is missing. And underneath, you see a gravelly, dusty substance. That's where the freeze-thaw has done its work to cause the concrete to break up. And what happens in the wintertime, the moisture gets in around the cold patch, gets underneath it, and it sits there like a bowl, and it absorbs a little bit into the concrete, and then with the freeze-thaw cycles, it breaks it up. It's just like if you were to put a can of soda into your freezer and let it freeze, the can is going to expand and it will probably burst. And that's exactly what happens to concrete when you have the freeze-thaw cycles. Now, what I can see in this photo, which you can't, is underneath that pothole are some hairline cracks. And this line shows the approximate location of those hairline cracks. And the freeze-thaw cycles have caused those hairline cracks to occur such that next year during the freeze-thaw cycle, that's where the pothole is going to be, along that green line. And then also, that's how big it's going to be next year. It's going to expand. And year after year after year, the pothole gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's why without maintenance and without the funds to do maintenance and permanent type repairs other than pothole patching, that's why the roads deteriorate to the extent that they are. This is a close-up of that same pothole cross-section, and I stuck my key into the material that's underneath the cold patch, and it's pretty much, it's loose, it's dust, it's gravel, there's really nothing there. So it's not surprising that during the freeze-thaw cycles that cold patch that's in there pops out, and you have giant potholes, and you can damage your wheel or your rim and so forth. So we started on Long Lake in April. We saw cut the pavement and we removed large sections of it. As I said, most of it has ASR and it is deteriorated quite badly. And we started pouring concrete early May, May the 8th, and this is on Long Lake just east of Rochester Road. This is Long Lake at Rochester Road, and we did have to do some of the work in the intersection of Long Lake and Rochester, and that necessitated closing down Rochester, some lanes, such that we had only one lane in operation in each direction, and as you might imagine, that caused some substantial backups. However, we did work with the Road Commission for Oakland County, who controls all of the traffic signals in Troy, and they were able to adjust the traffic signals such that it gave more green time to Rochester Road, about 90 seconds of green time. Took a little bit away from Long Lake, but it helped the Rochester Road traffic significantly. And the nice thing about that is the fact that this work in Rochester Road only took about a week. And after the concrete was poured, it was poured close to the weekend. We're getting testing shows that after 3 days, what we call 3-day breaks, that the strength of the concrete is sufficient to open it up to traffic. So pavement was removed, prepped, poured, and reopened to traffic in about a week. Unfortunately, we're not done at Rochester Road. We're going to have to do some more work in the next couple of weeks. This is early on in the project where we see long stretches of pavement being replaced. Right now, currently, we have on Long Lake 2 lanes westbound are completely poured out. They've got the eastbound right lane completely poured out, and they're working on the center and eastbound lanes. Completion of Troy Roads Rock is November of this year, and hopefully we will be able to meet that. We'll have good weather. We have had some rain events, some really substantial rain that has slowed down the contractor a little bit, although he does have plastic available, loaded into a truck and available to put on the concrete when needed if the skies are threatening. And so we hope that the work will progress as we have planned. We'll post updates on the website as to what roads they're working on and when they might be completed. And if you are interested in getting any of that information, please visit TroyRoadsRock.com. And with that, that completes my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Representative Hawryluk for closing remarks.
Thank you. I know while we get I do have a brief PowerPoint. I'm going to go quickly through it because much of the subject material is being changed as in the Senate, and but Also, we want to save some time for questions and answers. So if you still have a card to turn in, or if you still need to get a card to write your question on, just raise your hand, and Ray will be sure to attend to you. Additionally, I also want to acknowledge two members of the City Council who are here with us this evening. Ellen Hodorak and Wade Fleming are here. And a big thank you to the entire City Council and City Management for putting together the Troy Roads Rock program, because as we know, our roads need some tending to. And one of the interesting things as a legislator, I will tell you that the day really from day one in January of last year, there have been attempts and proposals to cobble together significant road funding somewhere in the $1 billion to $1.5 billion range. And I lost track of counting them. I can assure you that the number of bills that are out there are probably in excess of 50 at this point, dealing with that very issue. It's interesting also to note that you will often hear that in an election year, an even year, that major policy is not achieved. I think the weather has, with the more than harsh, severe weather that we had in the winter, I think it helped to accelerate people's attention to the roads. And so I think there is a possibility that either electorally or legislatively a solution will be found, a more comprehensive solution will be found this year. My personal belief is that if the legislature can't do it, and by the way, that means 56 in the House, 20 in the Senate, and the governor as well, it's a matter of getting the two legislative bodies together, as well as the governor, all on board in order to get legislation passed. But if the legislature can't do it, it would be my desire that we can at least have the votes in both chambers to allow the voters to pick a solution. Oftentimes you will find that people will be willing to put something on the ballot that they might be afraid of supporting themselves. One thing that did happen, at least in the House, was a desire to begin moving the needle. And that was last month when the House passed in a very bipartisan manner about $450 million of road funding. And that is continuous road funding that will be climbing. So I'll quickly go to my slides, and it's been a while since I've used this, so I will see what happens. So we have the House road funding package. Slightly different here. All right. So this just shows that the total transportation budget is $3.8 billion this year. There are all sorts of numbers that are floating around there for needs, anywhere from $1.2 billion to about $2 billion on an annual basis. And of course, that'll be climbing with inflation, cost of living, and so on and so forth, to $2.6 billion by this particular estimate in 2023. That's only 9 years from now. Why are we here? Well, overall gas and diesel tax collections are declining. Vehicle registration fees are increasing, not enough to make up the decline in fuel taxes, and also to make up for the additional need that happens with the cost of living increasing. One thing that's not in my slides and hasn't been discussed also, I will add, per capita lane miles in the state of Michigan, meaning that each of us is driving farther, is naturally increasing. And I say naturally is because we know that we're sprawling. You're taking Southeast Michigan Council of Governments has a report that they came out with prior to the financial crisis that showed between 1980 and the late 90s, the early 2000s, which is about 25 years, the population of Metro Detroit increased by about 4%, but the footprint increased by over 100%. It means that each of us is using more infrastructure in order to live, and we're driving farther to work too. Sales taxes is one of the reasons why you will hear people say that fuel taxes in Michigan are high. what you pay at the pump is high, but what actually goes to funding roads is not necessarily high in relation to our 49 other states. None of that 6% goes directly to roads. Now, the legislature, as you will see in a subsequent slide here, in the current budget year, which is fiscal 2013-2014, is spending about $451 million. I should say the legislature and the governor. Your state has allocated $451 million of general fund money to for a couple of things. One is we want to make sure that we have the state match to get our federal road money available to Michigan residents. That's part of it. And then you have the extra $100 million that was spent for supplemental road maintenance, the Winter Roads Program, and then $230 million, of which half has so far been distributed for the Roads Risk Reserve Fund. So this is the Michigan Transportation Fund distributions, and I know it's hard to see, but I think we can see that the line is not moving too far from the lower left to the upper right. It increased when we had the bump up in the late 90s. The last time there was a wholesale tax increase, and it's basically flatlined. You see some bumps up and down. You can definitely see the 10-year recession that the state had. And at the very end, you're seeing a slight bump up with our economic recovery. This is an interesting slide here, too. And for those of you that like calculus, the area under the curve would be effectively what you might call the disinvestment in roads subsequent to the last wholesale tax increase. So what we see there is the red line is effectively what you would be paying into the Michigan Transportation Fund. You, us, Michigan taxpayers, drivers, anybody that comes to the state and is buying gasoline or diesel fuel or is owning and registering a vehicle in the state of Michigan. So if it kept up with inflation, we would be where the red line is. Right now we are the blue line. And that differential there is just under $1 billion right now. So this is the House road proposal that passed last month and is being modified in the Senate. I don't know what is going to happen at the end of the day, but time is critical. Real quickly, bottom line there is about $450 million of additional road funding, which will be climbing because there's an inflation adjuster in there to $500 million and continuing upwards after 2018. I'm not going to belabor the point. We've had a lot of discussions about road funding, but this goes into more detail, and I can certainly get you the printout if you need this. Sales tax, this just again reiterates the point that Michigan charges sales tax on fuel, and none of it is directly going to roads. So think about this in dollars and cents. 1999 is where gasoline bottomed out. You could purchase gasoline at the pump on March 7th, 1999, which was the absolute bottom, in Clawson at 14 in Rochester for 76.9 cents a gallon. We've increased about $3 a gallon since then. So we're, somewhere between $3.70 and $3.90 at the pump right now. So back of the envelope kind of stuff, $3 increase times 6%, that's 18 cents. And that is not going into roads, but we are paying per gallon additional. Part of the package of bills amended the use tax. Effectively, bottom line, what we wanted to do was take general fund money and allocate it to road funding on a continuous basis. Constitutionally, the current legislature is not allowed to bind future legislatures to an appropriation. So what we had to do was create the mechanisms so that going forward, that the money would statutorily flow directly into the Michigan Transportation Fund. And so there were a lot of pieces. One was to direct the use tax that was not being allocated to schools and to the Michigan Transportation Fund, call it the discretionary part of the use tax. The use tax, in addition to when you purchase something out of state and you pay the use tax on your state income tax return, but the big nuts and bolts of the use tax are private party vehicle transactions. You don't pay sales tax, you pay use tax on that. Motor fuel taxes, we equalized the wholesale rate on diesel fuel. It is currently 19 cents a gallon, but since the House changed the formula from a flat rate to a percentage rate, it may be slightly higher than 19 cents. It could be, but it will not be lower than 19 cents. Effectively, what we did is we put a percentage rate in there with floors and ceilings to ensure that we had a minimum amount of revenue that was being added by this package of bills, but also trying to protect taxpayers if there were spikes or if the economy was distressed. And that's what we're seeing here. If you need the nuts and bolts, I can let you know. But unfortunately, what is going to be signed into law by the governor will be probably a lot different than what we passed based on what the Senate is doing. We made some tweaks to the vehicle registration reform, and that gave us about $15 million immediately. Truck weights, there is a process to legally allow trucks to have extra weight. Some of the trucks, we felt in the legislature, at least in the House, that they, in order to compensate for the damage that they were doing on roads, that they needed to pay a bigger amount of money, a larger amount of money. There were some bills also dealing with competitive bidding and warranties that were included as well, with the intent of making the roads last longer and saving taxpayers money. So that is the nuts and bolts of the House road funding package that passed. Minimum amount was $450 million. Now what's happening is, and we've been reading about it in the papers, I'm sure, and also online, the Senate is trying to find a way to take this and leverage it into a comprehensive package, but it is being caught up, if you will, in the politics of an election year. It's going to be very difficult, I think, before the election to put together a package that will properly, immediately fund roads right now, but it would be a real shame to go into the summer and not have, and this is me speaking, and not have at least the $450 million available for road funding, because we need to start moving the needle, and $450 million, by my account, is a lot more than zero. So without further ado, I will find out where the cards have been collected, and we will attend your questions and try and keep everybody engaged. I know it's been a long night. I want to thank all of you for staying with us this evening. Okay. Sure, you want to stand up there? All right. So the way we're going to do it is Ray, my assistant, Ray Watts, also a Troy resident, will be reading the cards, and we will ascertain who is the best to answer these questions initially based on the content of the card. And everybody, if you will, can chime in. There's no reason why we can't.
I just want to say, oh, am I on? Did you come? Okay. I couldn't tell. Appreciate the cards. If I didn't read it quite right, I forgot my glasses. So things are a little hard to see. I may ask you to help me out with the wording that you used. Tony, I think you mentioned this in your presentation, others as well, but what will the $456 million do for Michigan roads?
Well, I'll speak from the state trunk line perspective. As I had kind of noted, that largely ensures that we're able to capture our federal aid. There will be some maybe modest increase in the total number of projects, but it's in the single digits of millions of dollars, which is maybe one or two projects around the state. It's not it's an improvement, and as was pointed out, I think the change from a cents per gallon to a percentage basis is a vast improvement, and we appreciate the legislature's move in that direction.
I'll just chime in real quickly. My back of the envelope calculations show that since it is going through Act 51, it would equate to about $1.9 million for the city. Does that sound about right?
Yeah.
About $1.9 million annually for the city of Troy. And that's in addition to whatever the road commission may desire to spend on Troy roads through their mechanism as well.
Okay? And a lot of these questions are similar, so I'm kind of combining some of them. If you don't hear yours exactly read, it's because they combined it with somebody else's. But this one is very open. What is going to be done to make the installed contractors more accountable for what they install in our roads over the next several years? Warranties, et cetera, that kind of thing. Anybody?
Again, I had mentioned about if we had warranties on my system at the road commission, that 98% of my system would be beyond the warranty. It's because of the age of the system is the majority of the problem. But I think what people don't realize, the city as well as, I know MDOT, there's a lot of testing of materials that goes on before we allow contractors to place material. And even without a warranty as written with a bond, if that material is defective, we make them take it out as part of just a regular contract. There is a lot of quality assurance that goes in when we build the new roads. So, Tony?
The only other thing I'd add, well, there's two things I'd add, and maybe the representative can elaborate. I know there was a reform bill that included some provisions to use more warranties. It may affect state projects to a certain degree, although we already do many, but I think it would have an impact on the county and the city where they aren't. But to the degree that there's money to do reconstruction type work. The other thing I wanted to mention is as we're trying to stretch the dollars, we're not reconstructing many roads. And so a lot of people will look at a road that may look like it has a new surface. That was kind of a Band-Aid to kind of buy some time. And you get a winter like this last winter, that frost heave really starts showing the cracks coming through fairly quickly. And so folks think that it was on the surface that it was poor workmanship on the contractor's part. It simply was a lesser fix, that we were just trying to stretch the dollars and get a smoother ride as many places as possible.
Well, I think that's a good point Tony brings up, is that when we have a certain amount of dollars, say we have $1 million, how are we going to spend that? Are we going to reconstruct a half a mile of a street, or can I go out and resurface 5-6 miles of road and get another 7 years out of it? You know, what's the benefit? That's going to benefit more people than trying to do smaller chunks, because as you see, the system's deteriorating rapidly.
And so just to follow up on that legislative item, the part of the package of bills that passed the House, there was one that dealt with road warranties and says that any project that's over $5 million in magnitude needs to have a road warranty for to cover at least the first 5 years of the project. And there are some other guarantees and reforms also, but that's in a nutshell what that bill says. And it's over in the Senate right now, and so we shall see what happens. But I can't, that was one of those bills that was almost unanimously adopted by the House, and so it's very low-hanging fruit.
Can I comment on the 5-year warranty just a little bit? So our experience is that we saw the pavement curve up there. We know after 5 years whether the pavement's performing the way it should or not. And so we don't necessarily have to have a warranty for the full life of the pavement, which we hope is 20 or 30 years. We know in the first 5 years whether it's going to perform the way it should and whether we need to do something. And it is almost financially infeasible for a contractor to get a bond for longer than 5 years of warranty, because the sureties that issue those bonds don't know that they're going to be in business for more than 5 years. So it becomes cost prohibitive. So we found that 5 years is about the sweet spot to know whether we're on the right track. Is it going to perform for the life that it was intended, and we're, it's worth the value of that bond.
The City of Troy requires a 2-year maintenance and guarantee bond, and that's a a bond that covers materials and workmanship. And in fact, currently, we have a project that's approaching 2 years old, Beach Road. It's an asphalt road, and it's showing some signs of deterioration that we feel is due to materials and workmanship. So we have a meeting set up with the contractor next week to discuss that topic and to figure out, because there is some deterioration due to simple age, and we're going to figure out what that is, what portion of the deterioration is due to age, what portion is due to materials and workmanship. And for those that are materials and workmanship related, they would be repaired at the contractor's expense. I'd like to mention on Long Lake Road, Long Lake was done in 1997. It was when ASR was just becoming known in the 90s. It became an issue, and prior to that, ASR was not considered an issue or a problem in the state. And back in 97, an additive was used to combat ASR. Today we have an additive that's much, much better than what was used in 97. And in Long Lake Road's case, the ASR didn't show up for about 10 years. And that's when it really started to show up and accelerate in its deterioration, and that's what we have today. But as was pointed out, a maintenance and guarantee bond for 10 years is just not practical or realistic or cost effective.
Thank you, gentlemen. And this question is a little bit similar, but it kind of relates to Ohio and their roads. We did some comparison there. The mix, is our mix the same as theirs? Because they spend more, they have a better mix, kind of a thing. And are we confident that our roads, our mix will be as good as theirs? And did Ohio have ASR problems as well?
I'd like to comment on that. Give you a comparison. Long Lake Road that's being replaced is approximately 17 years old. Compare that to Big Beaver between City Hall and Rochester. That concrete is 14 years old. That concrete on Big Beaver is in excellent condition, and the reason for that is we're using an additive today that wasn't available in 1997. The additive that was used in 97 was effective to a point, but not to the extent that the additive that we use today is. And what we use today, it's called slag cement. And we are very confident that the concrete that we're putting down on Long Lake, just like what's down on Big Beaver and what's down on Long Lake east of Rochester all the way to DeQuinder, it's in excellent shape, and we're confident that what we're putting down this summer is going to be the same.
You want to go? The first, the materials, we all nationwide use similar materials. There's a lot of research that goes into asphalt mixes, concrete mixes. It's not just us making it up and saying put this down. There's research that's done by universities, there's Federal Highway, MDOT is a leader in materials. We all use similar materials. Now granted, for different weather conditions, or your environment, there's some smaller changes, but we all use similar things. It really does boil down to when you have you get 28 cents a gallon, you can build them thicker and you can build more of them and you can maintain them in better shape. I'm not against warranties. All these things we talk about are good things, but it really boils down to we need to invest more in the system. Four of us are engineers, and that's what we've chosen to do. We do not want to build roads that are inferior, and we want to use the best materials that are available.
Just to add on to that. I mean, Ohio's gas tax, it's not just 1 year that we're talking about. This has been many years that they have invested more effectively, and so that, this accumulates over time. I think the other thing is, for many of us, our experience of driving in Ohio is you get down to Toledo and you get on the turnpike. Well, that's not funded with any of their gas tax. That's funded with the toll that you pay. And I don't know exactly what it is when you go from Toledo to Lordstown. I think it's around $10 or $12 now. You do the math on that, it's a lot more than 28 cents per gallon. And it's going just to the turnpike. So you're paying to use that. I suppose if we were all paying, if every road was a toll road, we'd be investing a lot more into it. But
All right, this question takes a little different turn, kind of back to the truck weight limit that we talked about a little earlier. So regarding truck weight limit per axle, some say that on trucks, the dynamic change puts more weight on some axles, and therefore our weight per axle formula is flawed. How much truth is in that?
Well, I'm not an expert in loading of trucks, but I would tend to think that most freight haulers don't like to see the load shift a lot as they're moving. It's going to damage whatever that freight movement is, or the freight that they're carrying. The laws that govern how they load their truck are done in such a way that it is distributed as evenly as possible across the axles, and the Motor Carrier Division does check trucks to make sure that they have the proper weight per axle. So I've got a comment the other night. There was another town hall about they noticed that there don't seem to be as many trucks being weighed as there used to be. The motor carrier isn't out there as much. Well, there is a good reason for that, and it has to do, again, with technology. We now have systems where we're able to share information from state to state. And so as trucks, particularly coming in from Ohio, pass the weigh scales, they have those sensors up above the lanes, and we're able to simply capture the information that was already there before. So it allows the freight to move more efficiently. It's more efficient for motor carrier. They don't have to have as many people out there weighing every single truck, just the ones that had not been weighed before.
Different type of question. I don't think this is touched on at all tonight, but this individual lives fairly near 75. They make some descriptions where they live, and they wonder if there's any consideration of sound barriers. They say their house literally shakes at times when the trucks go by.
So State Transportation Commission policy around noise abatement pretty much says that unless we have $1 billion a year in investment, we don't build noise walls just to build noise walls. And we've been under that limit for quite a few years now. But if we are building a project where we are putting the road closer to homes, or we're widening the number of lanes, then it is a requirement as part of the environmental compliance that we consider noise effects and that we mitigate them if they meet certain thresholds. So I-75, because that project will add that fourth lane for a high occupancy vehicle lane, we are required to do that analysis, and actually we're going through the analysis right now in preparation for the upcoming construction. So I can't tell you exactly where there's going to be noise walls constructed along 75, but that will be a consideration. One of the factors that goes into that is whether the freeway was there before the homes were. But because we're talking about the widening now, the homes will have been there before the widening, so that changes the dynamic a little bit. So we should have some answers on that within the next year about where noise walls will be constructed as part of the project.
Okay, this person wants to know about the concrete, the fast drying concrete, the acceleration of the drying, and does that get road service longer because the concrete dries faster, or can we get back on, obviously we can get back on the roads sooner, so some comments there. I think that was mentioned earlier.
So the idea, of course, is to try to cure the concrete faster so that we can put traffic back out there sooner and inconvenience people less. The balance has been all along, there's always been additives in concrete, and sometimes they make the concrete less durable. And so that's been one of the reasons that road agencies have avoided those acceleration techniques in the past. But because of recent research, they've discovered new chemical additives that don't decrease the durability of concrete, and so we've been trying to apply those and test those. The other thing we're looking at is casting the concrete off-site and then placing it in place like overnight, so that it's already cured. And so we're looking at ways to do that. It's a little bit tricky making sure that the hole you cut is exactly the size of the patch. And so we're experimenting a little bit with that in some parts of the state.
On the Troy Roads Rock project, we're using a mix that has slag cement in it, and we are seeing 3-day breaks strength-wise that is sufficient to open the pavement to traffic in 3 days. The normal cure time is 5 to 7 days, and what we're seeing with our mix is a 3-day, as I mentioned. Now, when the weather turns cooler, that cure time gets longer. So when we get into the fall and colder temperatures, we may see 4 or 5-day breaks, and we may adjust the mix a little bit to go with a type 2 cement instead of a slag cement in order to bring it back down to a 3-day break. And this is not something that we're adding that's going to shorten the life of the pavement. It's just the mix that we are using, and it's been resulting in some very good breaks and allowing us to open the pavement to traffic in a very short period of time.
Okay, I think this one is probably a little more to you guys here in the city, Bill and Steve. Why is South Boulevard, especially Adams to Crooks, not included in road repair? And the second part is, when will the intersection of South Boulevard and Rochester Road be replaced?
This year, the program, it was concentrated on concrete pavements. The failures on Long Lake, the failures on John R., the failure of concrete in general is much more severe than asphalt. Our direction for next year is South Boulevard and then Long Lake west of Troy High. Those are the two primary areas, and one of the things we talked at when we were going through the NHPP funding selection this year was, okay, we'll do concrete this year, next year we're doing asphalt. So we're going to be very aggressive to go after funds. The majority of South Boulevard needs to be redone. A mile of asphalt overlay is $500,000 to $750,000 a mile. So if you were to do all 6 miles, you're talking $3.5, $4 million. So it's a significant project, and we've also got other areas in the city where Long Lake west of the high school, all the way into the township, is another area in Oakland County that's a priority project area, and one of the areas that we submitted for this next round of roads and risk reserve funding. Whether that gets any traction or not, we're not sure. But South Boulevard is a priority coming up next year. Trying to figure out a way to get funding earmarked or allocated to that project. One of the things we're going to be working with the county and as well as Rochester Hills is, okay, we don't have money, but we have 3 parties. What if we all look for a way to kick in a third of the funding? Does that make it more palatable? Can we do a project? Because obviously on the west end, there's some areas that when we look at ratings are in the 1s and 2s, which is mean the road is beyond failed essentially. So yeah, it is an area that is going to be a high priority next year, and one of the things we hope to do is sit down with the county and Rochester Hills here before the end of summer and look at some options for funding and how money can be moved around, because the county works on a different fiscal year than us, so it's trying to blend the 2 years to make things work. Gets a little interesting sometimes with federal dollars and state dollars and city dollars.
Okay, this individual feels that they're not seeing the hot tar being placed between in the cracks and the joints to keep the moisture out. and to keep the roads from cracking and breaking sooner. Is that true or not?
I'll tell you, from the county's perspective, he's absolutely right. We don't do enough of it. However, we're making choices on what we do, and one of the choices, we've reduced that program significantly right now. And when we see an increase in funding, we'll get back to it. But if you look at a lot of the roads and the condition of the roads, putting some hot tar in the cracks that we have really isn't going to do much good because they're too wide. They're best done on concrete pavements or asphalt pavements that are younger, if you will. You get into the 5 or 10-year age range, and that's perfect for that. But a lot of our roads are beyond that.
Yeah, MDOT's in pretty much a similar situation. Our roads are in a little bit better condition, and we do have a regular program for doing that, but probably not as much as we would like to. It is a good thing to do, though.
Okay, and probably for you, Representative Howrylak, what kind of extra fees are being put in place for electric and other non-gas powered vehicles to make for the non-use of gasoline today and tomorrow?
Right. And that's a good question. The best way, I think, to assess that is the answer is nothing recently, but probably the easiest way to assess that would be at the registration level, where you would have a classification of registration based on the vehicle. You have a bit of a tug and a pull, too, because you have different government agencies encouraging people to go to more fuel-efficient vehicles, and so there's a desire not to discourage that by having fees that are too high. So it's a matter of trying to balance that out. Obviously, we have heard in the past there was an idea that was floated to do either GPS monitoring, if you will, or metering of vehicles. I don't think that's something that is necessarily very practical, but these are definitely discussions that are happening as part of the overarching desire and goal to have about $1 billion to $1.5 billion annually of new road funding in the state of Michigan.
It's not just for him. If anybody else wants to comment. This individual is concerned about the lane markings, that the paint deteriorates over time and very hard to see at night, especially on asphalt when it's raining, and it becomes a safety issue for some of the seniors.
Well, we have an annual program. We paint our system yearly. And certainly if there is a section of road that somebody, if it's on the county system, go to our website or give us a call and we'll take a look at it. But we paint yearly, and quite frankly, there's a number of road commissions countywide that don't do that any longer. So
MDOT repaints yearly too, the lane lines and then the special markings like the arrows and onlys every other year. But we did, because of the limited funds, went from about 10 years ago, we started painting the lines 6 inches wide so they're easier to see at night and when the pavement's wet, and we've had to go back down to our old standard, which was 4 inches, simply to try to stretch the money. So that may be part of what you see.
One of the things, too, pavement marking is highly weather dependent. I mean, a lot of times we get concerns about not being able to see pavement markings, but it's 20 degrees outside, or we get, when it's wet, you need rising temperatures, you need dry pavement. I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be done in order to put down pavement, and a lot of our new projects, we're getting pavement done right at the end of a year, so there's pavement markings put down at the end of the year, which are temporary. They don't always make it through the winter, so come the spring, if you got real cold temperatures like we had this year, you might end up getting into April, May before you can actually get good pavement markings put down. I mean, the materials they're putting down now are very, very long-lasting, and on an asphalt pavement, typically they show up very well.
Will you back Governor Snyder's proposed $1.3 billion new funding for Michigan roads?
I presume that one's for me. The challenge is how, because I need a package of bills that'll be presented to me, and the leaders in both chambers are not inclined to put a bill up on the board, the voting board, that is going to fail. And so my desire, and I think I alluded to it earlier, was to create that funding or the revenue stream into the Michigan Transportation Fund to accommodate the needs of transportation in the state of Michigan. And I will add, there's also a need for other transportation alternatives in addition to roads, but this, of course, is a roads town hall. But I think we need to also come to the realization that there's a limitation on the ability, if you will, to cheaply move far out from a population center and commute into a population center for work. And that's the whole can you have your cake and eat it too thing. So inevitably, if you're going to have transportation, roads, any sort of a capital infrastructure, you need to have a mechanism in place to maintain it. And as we build out, then there's more to maintain and build. So, and then finally, I will add that I think the fuel tax, whether that's diesel or gasoline, is the simplest way of getting critical mass when it comes to transportation funding. And so that earlier chart that we had up here that had the blue line and the red line shows that if they had back in the late 90s built in a mechanism to accommodate the increasing costs, which would be labor and materials for the most part, of maintaining roads, we probably wouldn't be here today because it would be self-correcting. And so ideally, and the governor, I will tell you, in many different areas, because and I like to say it's because of his accounting background, likes to set a self-correcting mechanism, adjustments in whatever that rate is, so that you don't have to keep coming back to the legislature and people won't accuse you. It's politically unpopular to be advocating for adjustments which are perceived as tax increases, but the truth is that labor costs go up, asphalt costs go up, other road material costs go up. So you need to find that right balance. And I think realistically it's going to be a piece of this and a piece of that will get us to that level. And there's a real desire, especially after the long period of economic decline that we had in the state of Michigan, to prioritize in two areas. One, roads, and I'm not trying to say one or two, but two main areas are roads and education, and to use expanding revenues from the economy that is on the rebound into those two areas before we put it into other areas. That's unequivocally at least what I'm hearing. If you feel differently, let me know, and I'll try to make sure I accommodate your needs as well. But those are the two areas where I think there's a great desire to really focus on. And we are seeing increased tax collections and fee collections as the economy rebounds, and those collections are increasing at a much greater rate than the rate of inflation. But not to belabor the point, yes, I do want to see our roads taken care of.
We're coming down to the toward the end here. This individual says that I noticed turn lanes on 5-lane roads are not getting all the attention, perhaps, and I think I've noticed some of that too. When you get into the turn lanes, kind of bump, but the other lanes are getting. And they ask why or why not.
Well, I think in general, I mean, you do see it on not every project, but when you're trying to stretch your dollars, the turn lanes are the lower speed lanes. So, I mean, your through lanes where you've got traffic moving on these major roads, 40, 50, maybe 60 miles an hour. In some cases, you've got poor road conditions, you get water, you get snow, you get ice. In your turn lanes, you're slowing down, you're making much different types of movements rather than maybe changing lanes at 50 miles an hour on the main line. So one of the reasons why just trying to stretch dollars to do more mainline pavement rather than just the overall section.
You see that also on center turn lanes. You'll see the driving lanes in fair to good condition, and the center turn lane looks like it's falling apart, and it's the same reason we stretch our dollars by doing the through lanes and sort of letting go the center lane, which gets less traffic.
And on the same card, along with that, I think of some kudos to the Troy Roads Rock guys. They like the new cones instead of the big old barrels out there. So good for you guys. There's a question on the transit center, and we kind of agreed going in tonight that we're going to keep this just on the roads. So I'm going to put that one aside. You may want to take it up with city council people that are here. And then there's another one. Some of them just make statements. There's not a question, so I'm not going to put that one forward as well. And that's pretty much it, except that while I have the microphone, it's been my privilege to work with Cindy Stewart, with the city, to put this thing together. And she doesn't get enough kudos sometimes for all the hard work that she does in that. And Cindy, I know you can hear me. I appreciate your working with me and together in State Representative Howard-Lack's office. Appreciate it very much.
And I will second that. It's been a great pleasure putting this together with the city, the state, and the road commission. So thank you also, Cindy. I know you're in the back room, and this has been a great pleasure to have everybody stay late, and also for the city council for making those policy decisions to allow us to have better roads in a matter of a couple of months than we had going into the beginning of the year. So thank you, Bill and Steve and Dennis and Tony, for coming this evening. I know it's late, so thank you all very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.